Yes, and there we are again with a new episode of Dance Gems. Today we are going to talk about dynamic qualities in dance, and we already talked about, movement qualities and dynamic qualities, and in one episode, and then we discovered that dynamic qualities is such a big topic to that we decided to dedicate a complete episode on it. But we never do that, of course, without my good friend and colleague Ton. Let me see if he's there.
I am there, Sean.
Hey, Ton.
Yeah,
Yeah, an entire topic on dynamic qualities in dance.
yes, that's really fantastic. Because it's so huge subject to speak about dynamic qualities. And actually, I don't hear it so often, dynamic qualities in the lessons. What is a word what we use in the gem method? And we will specify the word dynamic, we defined that one, and we will define quality and what that means.
Yes,
So,
we often hear the word dynamics, right? People say, "Oh, dynamics, you need to change your dynamics." And then very often, and we can of course not because we didn't talk to everyone and we haven't been in every lesson, a lot of people think about changing time as the only dynamic that there is, which is of course, at least according to us and the gem method, not true. So we make a distinction between dynamics, the dynamic qualities, and then later on, we also will talk about the opposing dynamic qualities. So yeah, let's get into that, Tom. Um,
yeah, maybe we can start with the quality, what we mean with quality first, because when we mention quality, people speak mostly about that's a good product, but good is very subjective. When it's expensive, then it has a high quality, but it's not always necessary. So actually, quality, these are the requirements of the dynamic quality, and we will explain what dynamic is. Then maybe I start first with dynamic. Dynamic is actually changing constantly a situation, so it's not constant the same, and we move with our body parts with that proprioception. You remember, I hope, proprio, your own property, and ception, the perception of that body, of the 10 body parts, how they bend, stretch, and rotate. And in that, you can um, variate in the dynamic in every situation, in space, in directions, in level, and mainly in the muscle tension. And we call that tonus. And we try to keep them so low as possible and so relaxed as possible. And and then the qualities, I will explain the word a little bit later, but qualities we mean with bouncing, rebounds, what we have more ticking, popping. These are the main subject is from percussive, and you can there doing strobing, ticking. That these are just examples. Sean can explain how many we have and
yeah, we have.
what we have. Yes.
Well, I mean, this is of course arbitrary, but we typically talk about six dynamic qualities, right? And the qualities, you could actually translate it also if you can really show the difference, let's say, between ticking and strobing. That's a quality to show that difference, right? To show that specific change in there. But we typically talk about six dynamic qualities, um, and let's we go quickly over them with a few examples because it is literally
Yeah.
almost endless. But you have sustained movements that you keep going, and they're slow, smooth, continuous movements. A little bit short in this definition is what Tonnen always say: if you sustain something that goes fast, is still a sustained movement. But to keep movement on a sustained in a sustained movement is a certain quality, right? I mean, if you cannot keep that movement, so that's one thing. And then you have percussive movements that is sudden, sharp, and a little bit choppy, and that requires a little bit more, a little bit more force and in your muscle tonus. Some people say energy, but Ton and I actually make a real clear distinction what energy and force is. So I keep it with the word force. You could also maybe think about power. Energy is more like your fuel. That fuels all these movements. Then you have swinging movements, of course, in dances like jive and slow foxtrot and all the and West Coast and East Coast swing. You have that, and but then you use more the gravity. You give into the gravity. Some people say those are pendulum-like movements, right? That's another way. And then number four is suspend movement, and that gives a little bit the feeling that you go against the gravity, and it gives a movement of stillness and balance. And then you have collapse movement or falling movements, which is also another quality. And then last but not least, you had what Ton already started to talk about is the vibratory movements, rapid, continuous movement, ticking, strobing, all that kind of things. And to make that distinction between those six categories, that in itself is already a quality. And then what's super interesting is for me when I started to talk with Ton is that Ton always talk about the contrast between those qualities. The one that
Yes.
goes that's almost the opposite of the other, and that's where that's maybe the easier way to go into it, because if ticking and strobing is close to each other, and that's hard to do. But if you take stillness and fast, then you have a little bit more contrast, which is a little bit easier to get into.
Yes, these are all single actions, actually,
Yes.
qualities and dynamic qualities, because we call them dynamic qualities because it's like colors. You can combine them, you can use them singular in a single body part. So when I do ticking with my head, I tick, 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 tick with my head. I could also ticking with my hand, and then we have a composed movement with head and hands, because these are more than one body part. And then we can put symmetrically the ticking in it, in both of them. Tick, 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 tick. And why is this so important to know? Because all the wordings what we use for a swing or for bounce or rebounds, if these words are not defined, and we would understand a difference between bounds, in which area you have to be much more precise in which body part it will be. If you are not so precise and you also not understand the terminology bounds, then we speak about probably, or we understand probably two different things. And that's quite important to discover them first with your head, but you will not dance with your head, but you will dance with your body. That's the most important, and from your feeling. But when you have options, you can choose. If you don't have options, how you want to choose. And by practicing all these dynamic qualities in the singular body parts and how you can combine them, uh, yeah, that's the magic. And then you are the painter on the floor who paint in the sky and can do whatever you can do because you have options. You have your craftsmanship. When I say this, pronounce this well in English, and you can show magic on the dance floor instead just following somebody. I would first study them. And it's not something that you have a vocabulary only in words, but also in movement. And these two are in harmony. And when Sean and I understand the same word in the same context and the same definition, then probably the movement and the execution will be also close to each other. But anyway, Sean has a different muscle tension, a different thinking, a different feeling. There will be always a difference between two or three or four or five human beings because everybody is unique in their own way, and it needs some exercise and practice to get it synchronized or symmetric. You could also say to execute it.
Yeah, for sure.
That,
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to add, Sean,
yeah,
about the singular that
yeah,
we not mentioned, and the quality, the requirements. So all these qualities has requirements and definitions. Yes, Sean.
yeah. Well, no, no. If you know, I mean, if you can synchronize a movement from a dynamic quality point of view, with a fellow dancer, poppers, hip hop, they concentrate a lot on that. So that requires a lot of practice, right? So often, Ton and I, when we introduce a word, we look at the where the word is coming from, right? And this word, the word dynamics, coming from a Greek word. I think you have that in your book, by the way, dynamikos, and that means powerful or forceful, right? And then later on, we made the word dynamics from it, which also means power and force. It doesn't mean energy, right? It literally says it means power and force. And this is the remarkable thing. A lot of the words that we use, Ton, came in our language, the English language, much earlier. But this word actually only came in the English language in the 19th century. So maybe it's therefore that we still have not clearly defined what it means for everyone. So we use it kind of loosely, right? Does that make sense? So the countries that use the Roman languages derived from Greek and Latin, they probably are a little bit more clear when we say dynamics than in English because it's a relatively young word. And I thought it was interesting when I was, when we talk about it, we typically do some research around it. Um, what it is, and I think Rudolf Laban is the first one who tried to give some definitions around it, which is always interesting to compare what we think from Jem with Rudolf Laban, not to say what's better or not, because very often we are aligned. Sometimes we build on what he did, and then sometimes we go a little bit further in what he does, right? So, and that's hopefully also true when younger generations take the gem and take that hopefully even further than where we were, right? So that is actually what's called evolution, and we love that. We love that if people go on with the research and stuff like that. That's what I wanted to add with the word dynamic. It's interesting that it actually means forceful and power, where we very often talk about energy, which is a little bit hard to understand. You could talk about. I was training a dancer, Ton, and she said, "Well, I would like to spread my energy over the whole day." I said, "Okay,
Hmm.
that I can understand, right? That's not a bad way of looking at it." I said, "But why don't you try to deplete your energy in one dance only, completely empty at the one dance, and see if you can recoup it in the 30 seconds that you have in between?" Because that would be a meaning of sport. So we should talk a lot about energy in another in another episode, right? How do you use energy? And dynamic has a lot to do with power and force. And Ton made that very clear in his book, saying, "Oh, that's a lot in the muscle tonus. If you bend and stretch and you rotate, those are the three movements that you actually only can make with your body, with all the body parts. But the way you do it, it has a lot to do with how much muscle tonus you put behind that movement, right? You want to do it faster, you want to do it slower, and it's interesting to discover: do I relax to go faster, or do I put more tension when I go faster? You will literally, if you do that and you talk to martial artists, you will discover a lot of things. I can promise you. A lot of people think that more force is more muscle tension. Not always true. Sometimes it's relaxation that gives you more speed. Uh, yeah, you're. Yeah, I can't hear you, Tom.
Sorry, Sean.
No,
We call
okay.
it we call it in the gem terminology because each word we do a research over it,
Mm.
and it's not going over one night, but we speak sometimes weeks, months, or years about one word to find a balance in that word. And we define dynamics as a movement, an internal force, a constant change. It is the alternation of different conscious muscle tensions between different parts of the body. And in our system, would our method would that be 10? So it would be really interesting for me how Laban would define that. And what we already, Sean and I, realized that energy and force is not the same. But in a common language, we use these two words um, and mix them sometimes. For us, is energy always a constant there. It's everywhere and also in your body. I can get only uh, reset my body when I sleep, when I eat, when I'm positive. When I'm positive, I can also change. When I'm negative, mostly you couldn't change because it takes a lot of energy from your soul, and from energy it transformed to power, to a, to a force, and that power can change the speed, the tempo. I mean, the duration, a shorter duration or longer duration of a movement. So it can change the form because through the power, when I take my T-shirt here and I squeeze it, then it will change the form, and it get wrinkles. So it's quite interesting that energy is something for longer term, and the force what comes from it is short term, because you cannot continue go, because then your energy get more empty, and your power gets even more empty. So you have then to drink something or to rest a little bit, that you can your energy, your akku, how you call that, your cells, you can load them again. And uh, and this has and this has also influence on your dynamic quality.
Yeah,
So the basic would be your not condition, your power training, your flexibility training, and your stamina. That would be really important to, yeah, to improve them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Improve them. So you had a couple of questions in there, right, Ton? So first, you were interesting how Laban translated. Actually,
Yeah.
Laban doesn't talk about energy. He talks about space, weight, time, and flow, right? Those are the four things Laban always talks about. If he talks about dynamic, he means if you change the dynamic of space, you change the direction. You know, it's either direct or indirect. You change the dynamic of weight, strong or light. You take the change the dynamic of time, which we talk over duration, but he talks about time, quick and sustained, and then last flow and is bound and free. And some people say energy bound and free, and flow is actually in my opinion a better way. And if you completely jump to how science looks at these things, right, and they are a little bit clearer in the definition, in my opinion. Force is how do you manipulate your motion, right? It is with more force or less force. And the velocity, of course, that has something to do with the speed and the duration. And then science talks about energy, and they talk exactly the way you said it. It's always about the expenditure and the efficiency of it. And I understand why people in dance do that. If you deplete your energy and you want to show something forceful, you can't do it anymore, right? Because you don't have the energy to do it. But it's not the energy that makes the movement, it's the energy that fuels the movement, right? It fuels the
Like
force. So,
fuel for the body.
yeah, yeah, it fuels the body and the movement through that, right? So it is literally your battery. Your battery in itself in a car doesn't move. It is the mechanical parts that moves, and it is literally the electrical system that causes that force to make the movement. But the battery in itself does not move. You don't want to have a car where the battery is moving. That would be weird. But of course, if your battery goes down, you deplete your energy, and therefore your ability to force goes down. That would be in my opinion, a more clearer way also for students to understand the difference between energy, force, and power, right? And the size of the battery that defines how much power you have, eh? So, and that in the end results in how much force you can apply. And that's how science look at it. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about it, because Ton and I have always tried to explain the difference between energy, power, and force to other people. In Dutch, we actually don't even have a different word between power and force. But in
No.
and then of course there is different type of forces. You have kinetic force, you have mental force that also cost energy. By the way, to think a lot costs energy. So you have different type of forces, and in dancer in movement uses a lot of they use a lot of energy from a depletion point of view. But typically we translate it in the muscle energy, but the muscle in itself can only contract and relax. It's the only thing that a muscle can do. Um, so that hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear what it is.
Yes,
Um,
Sean, my question is how Laban then defines the word dynamics then? Do you know
well,
that?
he has not. I mean, maybe he has it because I don't have that in my head. And
Mhm.
as you know, I use the Laban movement analysis quite a bit, but I've never actually looked up if he had a specific definition of the word dynamics in itself other than change, right? Other
Mhm.
than change. So I think we go that a little bit further, but I will research it and see if I can find in one of his older book a clear definition where he put it down. But he talks always about change, and then change in those four aspects: space, weight, time, and flow. And that's the dynamical change in the Laban thing. And I can also call one of my teachers if he had, because he studied at the Laban Institute, um, and it's interesting to see if they have you put in your book a definition of it, right? Which also says change, by the way. If you would shorten it really, um, but yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, like Ton said, you can change your energy by take more in. You can then wield the same power, but if you have a little bit of energy, you can only do it for a shorter amount of time. That's basically what
Yeah.
it is, because you have a smaller battery and your battery is not completely full. So that means you can do it shorter.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, you answered the question already, Sean,
mhm,
from Laban, how he defines that by space-time, force, and weight,
yeah,
or bound, how
or
you call
flow,
it,
flow, yeah, flow,
flow. Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and he speaks also from energy, the inner, the inside energy, the internal energy. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, so
The
that's
effort
yeah,
theory.
but that's a translation, right? Because if you look at the original Laban, he says flow, bound and free. And I remember in later lessons that I took that some people replace the word flow for energy, and they say bound energy and free energy. But I think flow is his original word. Uh, Anyhow,
Mhm.
I'm not by no means. We have to call other people who are absolute specialists in this topic, but
Yes,
that's what I
he
remember.
was
But
absolutely
yeah,
100 year ago, Sean.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's not even that old if you think about it. But it's pretty revolutionary because he tried to at least find a system like you do, right?
Yeah.
It's the gem method has nothing to do specifically with a specific dance style. And first of all, if I read the gem method now, and I read it multiple times, at first I thought it was only about dance, but it's actually about movement and sometimes even about a lifestyle altogether. And everything in gem, probably that's true for Laban too, you can apply to any dance you talk about.
Yes,
It has nothing to do,
absolutely.
yeah. There is maybe because that's the context that Ton and I often talk about because that's the world we grew up in, is the ballroom and Latin dancing. But Ton did way more. He's very versed in hip hop as well. I'm very versed in martial arts, and all these things nothing to do with it can actually all applied to all movements that you have now in for us. Of course, we are dancers, we love to research dance, but even
Yes,
other athletes could take advantage of a lot of the things in the jam method,
yes,
for 100% sure.
absolutely. Only they didn't discover it because we're quite small and we believe in this philosophy
Yeah.
because we ask constantly question to the word. I use the word dynamic and I spoke like my teacher, fast and slow. That's the only thing what I know at that moment. But a real definition wasn't there. And I have a real definition now for myself. The movement, the internal force, a constant change. It is the alternation of different conscious muscle tensions between the different parts of your body. So I have a definition now for myself. So a constantly change between the body parts with a different muscle tension tonus. And start from the most relaxed muscle what you can do and build up the pop. A pop is some tension what you create in your arm. I take one, or in your hand. Pop. You build up the tension. But if your hand or your arm is already in tension, you have to build even more tension on to pop. So better is reduce the muscle tension and build the muscle tension up to a maximum of a pop. That's a quite powerful movement. And equality is a conscious alternation of the muscle tonus between the 10 body parts and the coordination of them, such as a way from a harmonious of disoriented whole. And the quality I have also defined as a requirement. And what all these words we try to define them, Sean. But I not understand my colleagues, not all of them, but the most of them. They say something, and I think, okay, do you know now what you really said there? Use more energy. Yes, give more energy to your partner. Um, I ask myself, how is that possible? Feel the gravity. Um, you have a center, but everything what they say is actually imaginary. So the words are really maybe powerful, but actually ask yourself: is there um, a definition for it, what makes it more concrete, a little bit more concrete. It could be different than ours one, that it's fine too, Sean.
Yeah, that's definitely fine too, and it actually makes it for us always interesting, not to debate who's right and wrong, like we just did, very briefly. Not even so deep about. I mean, how would one of those, influences Laban talk about it? We could also talk about Franklin. Did he write something about it right in his system? So we do that typically. We look at these things quite thing. What I thought was very interesting, Tom, is when you said that you spoke about it a lot. Is that's where we started to connect so deeply. Is you always start from a moment where where your muscle, there is no muscle tension, right? And there is this. I think I mentioned him in. I think I mentioned this guy in the podcast before, but there is this man, he's still alive, by the way, Peter Ralston, and he wrote a book, Effortless Power, and he talks
Yeah.
about the inner martial arts, which is the introception that we talked about before, and well, it's not his principle. The principle behind this, which is also in the martial arts that I studied, is if you can figure out what you can do with the least amount of muscle tonus, right? Then you actually have a reference point for yourself, how you can build it up and what the change is in the movement that you make. That's how I now see it, right? For martial art, it has immediately a goal. For dancers, the movement in itself is a goal. So I translated that if you can start from almost a point zero is almost impossible because then you probably would collapse. But but if you can go from a point zero and then build it up, you can see what the effect is on the movement that you do. Let's it's only opening your arm, moving those things, and then put more muscle tension to it. What is going to happen? And then there is, and the 100% is very hard to define, by the way, because we don't know what that is, because that's so different for other people. But to make that change either gradually or suddenly or sustained, that's what is ton definition, that constant change. But you need to look at it, that there's so much in that definition. uh, I think it's yeah. Well, I always say that with every topic, Tom. I think it's one of the
Mhm.
most interesting topics in your book. But I say that with
Yes,
every topic that we do. Right? Last we
yes,
had it about form, and I said, "Ooh, it's one of the most interesting topics in the book."
yes. But that's become because I put 17,000 hours research in it. So it not came overnight because even I didn't understood the word for many years. I didn't understood it. And actually, when we continue to the dynamic quality, actually, and the contrast in slow and fast, actually, you not create that. First of all, your muscles create that, but before the muscle is your brain, and the stimulus in that brain stimulate that muscle or stimulate that body part, stimulate that muscle from the proprioception, and then you can make a certain amount of tempo in it or speed in it. And this is really important to understand. It starts first with your brain, and the brain gives the stimulus to your muscles and or yeah, in that body part. The body part what you choose before, Sean, because actually, if you want to manipulate it, you be aware of it, and when you be aware of it, you have influence on it. That's the captain of that ship, that brain, who is steering that ship. But actually, to be, because I hear also many people, yeah, but you are in your head. No, actually, it's in a split second. I make a decision in my head. It popped up for my instinct, my intuition, my character, and that character is also my personality, and all the nature nurture experience I put in that one split second, I make then that decision. I want to move like that, and that makes me me. And I support some basic things like breathing with the movement, the relaxation, the space time. We speak always from two words, and that's the four dimensions. And my fifth dimension, that's my brain, my personality, and there under is the character, the instinct, the intuition, the DNA, everything is there in it from the interoception. And then in a split second, you make a decision. And how more you off practice that, then how more you can manipulate it. And then still you can be in that body, but somewhere my body makes not the decisions because my body part can think, but not think like my brain. So my brain is actually, yes, that's actually the powerful one. And when I would move only from my body, then I would move from a muscle memory just because I practiced this many times and this motoric movement is already there. But when I want to get out of that box, I have to give my brain and myself a command and a stimulus to do it differently and try to get out of that box and be free and release. And the body will execute it. And it's really nice to find that harmony, that ping pong, brain, body, body, brain, brain, body, and how they have the communication between each other. That's so wonderful.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's probably the same, but I rather talk from consciousness, right? I talk
Yeah.
from, you want to have your be conscious about the movement you make. And, we currently think that conscious is in the brain, right? We cannot even, 100% say that. And the body also has a form of consciousness, by the way. So sometimes I say jokingly, we have a dancing mind and a conscious body. But what I want to say, and it's something that, and that has all to do with dynamics, by the way, is that a lot of people say, oh, be less in your mind or be less in your head, which actually what they mean to say, be less busy with things in your head that has nothing to do with your dancing. That's actually what they want to say, and that means like, oh, I'm too busy. What's the mistake that I made, right? Which is behind you or too far ahead, instead of being in the moment when you do. And then to be only in the moment is actually not a conscious mind, because as a dancer you have to be pretty strategic. You have to kind of already know what movement you are going to make. So Ton and I already said that your conscious mind is actually in the future. You take a decision for what you are going to do, and your body is in the moment. And that, is a lesson that I try to teach for many, many years. And because that, to be honest, really the nonsense of people talk about the power of now. You have to have a conscious mind that can think ahead and plan for you where you go to. Laban talked about it. If you want to make a change in space, you have to think ahead. Where am I going to? But you have to understand where your body is. And that is a clear, sign of what we call mental practice, conscious practice. And only thinking about what am I doing today, it stops you, right? You need to know. And your body is smart. It can stay in a moment, while your mind is, as a conscious mind, is in a positive way with what decisions am I going to make. And practicing the dynamics, you will see that you cannot even measure how fast you can make those decisions, right? That is the beauty of it. If you practice all these different dynamics in your body, then you can actually see that. So consciousness and awareness is a different thing. If your conscious mind works on full speed, that's your awareness can almost not even follow it. That's how fast it goes. right? When I consciously grab my cup here, I don't have to think about, oh, I stretch my arm and I grab to it. But I practiced that before. Oh, it is this. And then I put it in. So, and some people translate that wrong in muscle memory, where we say we constantly manipulate it. There is a moment of muscle memory, and yeah, that system taught how over time you started to write it down. We started to talk about it. The deeper you go into it, the more complete you see it is. And we still have a development in there to go, by the way. Specifically in the area of dynamics, there's so much to say about it. But if you only stick to your definition, that looking for change in your movement, and then make that in a conscious way, right? That's the simplest definition of dynamics. And then how you can do it? Oh, you can find some answers definitely in Ton's book, and you can find some answers in Laban. But you have to understand that it's a constant conscious change of movement. Um, that makes it dynamic. And you actually, Ton and I, we believe at least that we can see if a dancer is actually consciously making those decisions or just let it happen. And both is a form of dynamic, of course, but one is a different quality. When you
Yes.
control it, it's a quality difference. When it just
Yeah.
happens, it's yeah,
Mhm. That's an interception when you dance only from your feelings.
yes, right,
And yes, and but when you are sick or don't feel um, so positive at that moment, then on the knowledge you can still survive then because you have options to choose. But if the knowledge is not there, you still dance from your feelings. But also it's nice, but it will it is less constant, I would say, because it is influenced by day. Of course, this is also with myself, but through the knowledge, I can still choose and pep myself a little bit up to go for it. But I wanted to say, actually, Sean, the core of existence and the acceptance of yourself makes it strong to believe how you can use these dynamic qualities in which order. If you are not be if you are be afraid and you are closed and you had an illness or etc., then it's more gone. So the knowledge, it's really important to understand all these qualities and exercise them in these different body parts, isolate them with one body part, practice it with the other body part, and constantly repeat that. And then that you can choose from it. And then the most beautiful, that's the spice of it, that's the manipulation of it. That makes it spicy for me, how you are able to manipulate it. And I can see if people can manipulate it on the floor or they just do a routine. And a routine is also dancing. Uh,
sure.
uh, I'm thinking on mum, move on music, I would call that. In Dutch, we call it bam, bewegen op muziek. But I will
Bomb.
that's mum. So I can see when somebody is moving on music in a routine, I see that immediately. And when they or she or he or is aware of it, then and he can manipulate that one in that conscious mind. That's so wonderful to experience that, Sean. Whew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. Yeah, I do think that in dance development, and then if I say young and older, it has nothing to do with age, by the way. It's when you start, right? And you define. But in the beginning, Yeah, obviously people are a little bit more busy with the physicality, what we sometimes call in words, they sometimes call it techniques or step and choreography. You know, what do I need to do? That's normal. And hopefully, if you go further in your dance development, you're more busy with the musicality, the dynamics, and then ultimately what emotions, you know, you express, not the emotions that you per se feel, right? What is it that you want to express? So that's some sort of a, I think, a development, and it doesn't go literally one after the other, but that's typically you see when people come for the first time in your dance class, they're very busy with what steps do I need to make, Ton, right? And then, but Ton actually, with his younger students, already proved that a lot of these concepts that we believe that we can only teach to experienced dancers, if you do it in a certain way, you can introduce them at a way earlier stage in a dancer's development, which I've always been interested in. Why do we wait to talk about things like Laban until someone is an experienced dancer? We need to actually bring that in way earlier in on the level where they are. And I think you do that with your young kids. I mean, you talked about
Yeah,
kids that were like 8, 9 years old.
yeah, 8, 9, mostly 10 years,
10,
11,
wow.
12.
Oh, still young, still young.
They are still young, and they
Yeah.
know the proprioception, they know the
Oh,
interoception,
wow.
they know the conscious mind and
Wow.
the awareness. Yes, that's so one, and the musicality, because actually I learned them to discover themselves. You have only yourself and your environment and how your being react on that one. That's quite important. The environment, like when you have a partner or a team with more dancers in it,
Yeah.
then you get influence to that one. And if you told me if you the smartest one of that team, um, you could how you said that from the smartest one. If you are the smartest one in the room,
You are in the wrong room.
you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
So try to get as a team all of your on the same level of the terminology what you use and understanding, because then the team gives the magic, and then you can manipulate even in that team. You have a routine, but in that routine still you must be able to manipulate, not just do a trick and make it only synchronized and in the forms and dynamics the same. I see then a team, but I don't see the individual dancer in that team. I want all individual dancers in that team makes the team,
Yeah.
and it's not the team make the individual. That's vice versa. No, no. The individual dancer makes that team together. Each other achieve more. And when you are then singular on that floor, solo, then you have maybe also the environment without music or with music. You don't need always to have music to dance on it. And then specify the music. What is the partner? Is it the drums or is it the voice or is it the violin or the piano? And react from that inner interception and your conscious what you want to choose and how you want to change that in that duration in a split second, and then let it come in that body and then feel yourself free. Use your breathing, use your relaxed muscles, and use your how is that backpack of experience through your life to put it to that one moment. And you said it very well, Sean. The mind is before the body, the mind is already in the future, and the body executed in the moment. And I like this so much. And that's also how I see it. And sometimes the body react or something because the dancer did something. And then you realize, you get aware, I can react again on that one. And
Nice.
you get like a ping pong between the team
Yeah.
members.
Yeah, that is a nice addition, and I think we should put that in some sort of a diagram because reacting in the moment, if you do an intuitive dancer, that is nice too, right?
Mm.
So it's a combination of these things, and it's truly like how a martial artist functions, right? He thinks strategically. At the same time, he knows how to react in the moment, and that is yeah, that can be trained, by the way. Otherwise, you and I would not be sitting here, because but that is, that's a whole different area of what we call then mental coaching and mental training. uh,
Yes.
and But you have to have a trained body to good up to that form. Well, my dear friend, we
And a
hit
trained
an
mind.
hour here.
Yes, and a trained mind, Sean, not
Oh
only a
yeah, yeah,
trained
yeah,
body.
yeah, absolutely. That goes almost without saying, I would say. But yes, definitely, it is that is very underestimated how many hours experienced dancers put in just singular movements. I would always say, to get that to a certain level that they can start to control it.
Mm.
I think that
Yes.
almost, yeah. And also your
Be-
thinking, right? We
yes,
train, Ton and
before.
I train our thinking because of all the research we do. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, and the many times we talk about it, it's not argue, but then we say, oh no, maybe it's this. Oh no, maybe it's
Yeah.
that. The-
Yes, Sean, what I want to mention before we are closing now, because you have also to go now in a few minutes, is the dynamic, not the dynamic quality, but the dynamic contrast. Contrast is not only fast and slow or high and low, it's also the dynamic quality in that, because you need for a contrast at least two qualities. And
yeah,
that could be a bouncing or a swing. That's two opposite things. And you have already a slight contrast, of course, because you use two different qualities. That's a composed quality when you would that do in your body. And that's not only slow or fast or with a lot of tension or less tension. It's also that quality of ticking and go constant, not constant. How you say um,
sustained.
sustained? Yeah, that word. That's also an opposite of that one, and that's so you have maybe hundreds of qualities, and you can um, pick two different ones, and you have already a slight contrast. And in that two different dynamic qualities, you can put also two different durations in it. The one is slow and the other one is fast, but then you have four elements already in it, what makes a contrast even bigger. And to do a contrast, how more far away the qualities are from each other, how extreme are the dynamic contrast will be.
Yeah, and
Realize,
the more visible it is, but also the more you feel it, interoception. You see it, you feel it,
yeah,
which immediately also causes a reaction. And then we typically, I mean, this is I remember I worked long time ago with with a dancer when we start to experiment it. But so typically in Laban we put sudden versus sustained, right? We do strong versus light, and we do fast versus slow. But you can do slow versus sudden, right? And mix all those contrasted in a little bit less logical way. And that actually, and Ton does that a lot, by the way. It's not always fast versus slow. It's actually the contrast can go way more extreme than just taking the black versus white. That's obvious, but to take other ways to
yeah,
and to think about it, you have to experiment. You have to work with each other and just make it a game, right? Oh, can I do this? Can I do that?
yes. But see it also like that. Your senses from yourself, the intro and the extroception, we spoke about it. But our senses, like the eyes, the ears, when you're looking as an audience, I can only speak for myself. I like the dynamic change, the constant change of it, because that's an expectation what I have. Not You can also choose to be always the same and repeatable movements, and you do this for a half hour. Yeah, that's art also. But I expect some uh, constant change, and you can only make it then you stimulus the eyes from an external perceiver, and that's when he gets stimulated. That makes it also exciting, where he thinks the day after, what I saw actually, and not
Yeah. Yeah. No, we
how nice I executed the program. That's also nice and
yeah. Yeah.
really fabulous, but that's not where I am looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. We could spend another hour on it, and we probably
Yeah,
will.
absolutely
But
sure.
if people talk about fast, so we talk about duration, and they think they by
Yeah,
speeding up the duration, that's not fast. What people perceive as fast, I did research that. If some people change just in a certain way the direction, they think, oh, they're really fast. But what they did, they use sudden the dynamics and the direction had nothing to do with the duration. You see that? And that's perceived as fast. So what people even have in their mind is definition. If from a dynamic point of view, they use actually different dynamic qualities to show what's fast. That's what I hope dancers will get when Ton and I talk about these things.
yeah. One thing, you can only do sudden by bending, stretching, or rotating. Otherwise,
Right?
it's not
Exactly.
possible in that body part. How you want to move, actually. So that's still the basic, these three elements.
Yeah, that's where we started. That's where you started, I have to say. And we still stimulate students. Okay, can you find other ones? Then we'll be gladly taking it in the book, but we have not heard anything back. All right, Tom. Time is ticking. And this was another episode of the Dance Jams, and it's a large topic, dance dynamics. And we always get a little bit more dynamical at the end of the of the show. But
Yeah, we get
well,
more
thank you,
awake, Sean.
Ton, for sharing your wisdom and discussing this with us. It is always a pleasure.
Yeah, me too, Sean. And thank you, listeners, when you came till the end. That's a really big compliment.
Yeah.
So, congratulations that you reached the end of our podcast.
We
Thank
reached
you
the end
very
of
much.
that podcast. All right, so we'll see you next time in another topic, right? I'm sure Ton and I come up with, hopefully for you, another interesting topic. But we will discuss it with as many and as much dynamics as we possibly can, right? Dynamic qualities in dance. That was what it was today. I already say goodbye to you, but in the meantime, I'm already playing the music and say where you can find us. Right? All right. Bye bye, Ton.
Goodbye, Sean. Till next
Yes.
time.
See us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. But we also have our own website, www.jam.dance/podcast. There's way more to find than only the podcast, by the way. And of course, visit us and make friends us on the Facebook group, The Dance Jams in English, right? And Tom places us always on all the channels that we have nowadays, WhatsApp, uh, um, I forget all these other things, but we'll put a list on that maybe next time. All right, bye bye.
Bye bye.